They've lied to you since the beginning. The greatest secret isn't locked in government vaults or ancient temples. It's inside your own mind. For centuries, they've worked tirelessly to suppress knowledge that could set you free. Knowledge that threatens everything they've built. At the center of this hidden truth lies a small, mysterious gland buried deep within your brain, the pineal gland. Ancient Hermetic masters believed it was the gateway between this physical world and higher realms of existence, a bridge to states of consciousness far beyond anything you've ever been taught. But you were never meant to know this. Instead, they buried it under layers of ridicule, misinformation, and fear. Because if you understood what the pineal gland could truly unlock, you'd become impossible to control. And that's exactly what they fear most. For thousands of years, the Hermetic masters guarded a truth so powerful, it was only whispered among select initiates. They understood something that modern science is only beginning to glimpse, that the pineal gland is not just a simple organ buried in your brain, but a sacred gateway, a direct channel to dimensions far beyond the physical senses, positioned deep within the center of the brain. This tiny gland, shaped like a pine cone, has been called the seat of the soul by philosophers and mystics for millennia. To the Hermetics, this wasn't metaphor or superstition. This was a map to something real. They believed the pineal gland was designed to enable humans to access states of consciousness far outside the boundaries of ordinary perception, connecting directly to higher planes of existence and universal intelligence. But this knowledge was never meant for the masses. The Hermetic teachings were not written for casual readers or academic debate. They were carefully guarded, passed only to those who demonstrated discipline, integrity, and readiness. These teachings revealed methods of activating the pineal gland, practices that allowed the practitioner to experience profound mystical states, heightened perception, and access to a level of awareness that made them immune to manipulation and control. It wasn't about religion. It wasn't about dogma. It was about liberation, complete and total sovereignty of the mind. The Hermetic path is founded on the principle of, as above, so below. The idea that the universe reflects itself infinitely, and that the macrocosm of the cosmos exists within the microcosm of the human body. The pineal gland, they believed, was the bridge between these realms, a receiver and transmitter of energy and consciousness that connects us directly to the fabric of reality itself. But this is precisely why such knowledge had to be buried. A population that understands its own innate power becomes ungovernable. People who awaken their higher consciousness no longer bow to external authority. They no longer chase material distractions, fear artificial constructs, or submit to arbitrary systems of control. Over time, as religious empires rose and centralized power consolidated, the Hermetic wisdom was forced underground. The forbidden method to activate the pineal gland was dismissed as cult nonsense or mystical fantasy, discredited by those who benefited most from the public's ignorance. Fear was their weapon, and ridicule their shield. Any exploration of this realm was labeled dangerous, heretical, or even insane. They couldn't risk people discovering that ultimate freedom wasn't granted by governments or spiritual institutions. It was always within them. And that's why this information isn't openly taught today. Even modern science treads carefully around the pineal gland, reducing it to a regulator of melatonin and sleep cycles, conveniently ignoring the vast traditions that point to its much deeper purpose. But a few researchers have started to stumble upon something they can't fully explain: how this small gland might produce powerful neurochemicals linked to extraordinary states of consciousness. What the Hermetics discovered through disciplined practice and profound inner work, modern science is only now beginning to validate. Some of what we're discussing here can barely be touched on in a public platform like YouTube. That's why we share even deeper, more confidential knowledge inside our Free Insights Academy newsletter. You'll find the link in the description, and for a limited time, you'll also receive a free copy of the Kybalion when you sign up. The forbidden method involves a precise combination of breathwork, controlled visualization, frequency alignment, and an unwavering focus of intent. These aren't casual meditations or wishful daydreams. They're disciplined practices honed over centuries, to systematically unlock dormant aspects of consciousness. The Hermetics knew that consciousness wasn't something trapped in the brain. It was a field, limitless, expansive, existing beyond time and space. The pineal gland was the key to accessing it. Through the activation process, initiates reported profound experiences, visions, nonlinear perception of time, encounters with higher intelligences, and an overwhelming sense of unity with all existence. But unlike modern self-help trends that promise instant results with little effort, Hermetic activation required serious discipline. It demanded a restructuring of the mind itself, a process of purification and focus that stripped away the layers of societal programming long before the higher doors of perception could be safely opened. This wasn't just about curiosity, it was about responsibility, because once these gateways are unlocked, there's no turning back. Yet in today's world, this entire approach has been buried beneath a mountain of cynicism, distraction, and spiritual counterfeits. We are told to laugh at such ideas, to fear them, or to dismiss them as pseudoscience. Meanwhile, we are pushed deeper into cycles of consumption, obedience, and artificial happiness, never questioning why the door to higher awareness remains locked. But the door was never locked from the outside. It's been within your reach all along. For centuries, the idea that the pineal gland could unlock higher states of consciousness was dismissed as mystical fantasy, confined to esoteric circles and ancient texts. But as science advances, cracks are forming in the rigid wall that separates so-called spiritual nonsense from scientific credibility. The more we learn about the brain, the more unsettling it becomes for those who've long denied these ancient teachings. Because behind the language of neuroscience lies a truth the Hermetics understood long ago. Consciousness is not just a byproduct of brain chemistry. It's something far deeper. Modern neuroscience acknowledges that the pineal gland plays a role in regulating our circadian rhythm by producing melatonin, the hormone responsible for sleep. But this limited explanation barely scratches the surface of what this gland might be capable of. The gland's unique location, at the geometric center of the brain, surrounded by cerebrospinal fluid and receiving a rich blood supply, has led some researchers to propose that it might be uniquely positioned to interact with electromagnetic fields. Its structure includes tiny crystals of calcite, which exhibit piezoelectric properties, meaning they can generate electrical charges under pressure or frequency shifts. This is not speculative pseudoscience. These properties are measurable, observable, and documented. The Hermetics may not have used the language of biochemistry and quantum fields, but their practices were designed to engage exactly this phenomenon, stimulating the pineal gland through precise vibrational techniques. Frequency is the invisible force that modern science is only beginning to appreciate in full. Sound waves, electromagnetic waves, and even brainwave oscillations all carry frequencies that affect our mental state. The Hermetics understood that by introducing specific frequencies, whether through chanting, breath control, or meditative states, they could shift the brain's frequency into resonance with higher vibrational planes. This resonance isn't just a metaphorical idea. It's a physical, measurable interaction where brainwave patterns shift into coherence with external frequencies, potentially stimulating neurochemical responses that open altered states of perception. And then there's the chemical component. Studies have begun to suggest that, under certain conditions, the pineal gland may have the capacity to produce endogenous dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, a substance often associated with profound mystical experiences, near-death phenomena, and transcendental states. When people report out of body experiences, visions of light beings, or an overwhelming sense of unity with the universe, these states share commonalities with those induced by DMT. The Hermetic activation method, combining breath control, visualization, and frequency alignment, may create the precise internal environment where this endogenous DMT is released naturally, allowing the practitioner to enter these expanded states without external substances. Even mainstream researchers are now acknowledging that consciousness itself might not be confined to the brain's hardware. Theories like the holographic universe and the idea of local consciousness propose that our minds may be tapping into a field of information that exists beyond our physical structure. Concept perfectly aligned with Hermetic teachings. In this model, the pineal gland functions not as a generator of consciousness, but as a tuner or receiver, allowing access to different layers of reality, depending on its state of activation. The more coherent and balanced the internal frequencies become, the more profound the access to this broader field of consciousness. Yet, despite mounting scientific hints, this area of research remains controversial and heavily stigmatized. Institutions tied to pharmaceutical profits, political control, and rigid academic paradigms have no interest in opening these doors. Why? Because once you acknowledge that consciousness isn't limited to brain chemistry, the entire materialist framework that props up modern control structures starts to crumble. A society built on fear, consumerism, and obedience relies on keeping you disconnected from this truth. The Hermetic method, long ridiculed by mainstream authority, is not based on blind faith but on precise, reproducible techniques that engage both the body and mind in harmony. Modern brain imaging is starting to show that deep meditation alters not just brainwave patterns, but also neuroplastic structures within the brain itself, increasing connectivity between regions associated with higher awareness, empathy, and intuition. Breathwork, once dismissed as nothing more than relaxation, is now shown to directly influence the autonomic nervous system, heart coherence, and even gene expression. The science is catching up, but very few are willing to connect these dots out loud. The implications are too disruptive. At its core, the forbidden Hermetic method isn't about believing in magic. It's about understanding the interplay between physiology and consciousness. How vibration, breath, and focused intention can shift brain states, trigger powerful neurochemical releases, and open access to a much broader spectrum of reality. The ancients may have lacked modern terminology, but they mastered the application. They understood that the pineal gland wasn't just a gland. It was a portal, and for those disciplined enough to activate it, reality itself would never look the same again. If the Hermetics discovered a path to unlocking the highest levels of human potential, you have to ask the uncomfortable question. Why don't we all know about it? Why isn't this taught in every school, practiced in every community, or supported by governments supposedly invested in human progress? The answer is brutally simple, because a population that awakens to its full potential is impossible to control. This knowledge was never lost by accident. It was buried deliberately. Throughout history, those in positions of power have always feared what they could not control. The Hermetic teachings represented a threat, not just to dogmatic religion, but to the very structure of political and economic control that thrives on hierarchy, submission, and ignorance. The rise of organized religion marked a turning point in this suppression. As empires expanded, centralized religions offered a powerful tool for unifying populations under rigid belief systems. These institutions needed followers who would obey authority, not seekers who would question the very nature of existence. Mystical paths that emphasized direct experience of the divine, paths like Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and other esoteric traditions, were quickly branded as heretical, dangerous, even demonic. The Church couldn't allow individuals to bypass their gatekeepers and access divine knowledge directly. The pineal gland represented precisely that threat, a personal gateway that made priests, rituals, and intermediaries unnecessary. So they labeled it blasphemy, condemned its practitioners, and destroyed entire bodies of knowledge to protect their control. But religious power was only one side of the coin. Political rulers also understood the danger of awakening. A citizen who perceives reality as flexible, who sees themselves as connected to higher realms of consciousness, cannot be easily manipulated through fear, division, or manufactured crisis. Such individuals don't crave material distractions or shallow status symbols. They don't live in blind obedience to economic systems built on debt, consumption, and wage slavery. Instead, they become sovereign beings, self-directed, internally fulfilled, and immune to the tactics of fear-based governance. In a world where control depends on mass compliance, that level of personal sovereignty is revolutionary. Fast forward to modern times, and you'll find the same mechanisms still at work, only more sophisticated. Science, now fully intertwined with corporate and political interests, dismisses or ridicules any exploration that threatens its materialist narrative. Pharmaceutical industries thrive on a population disconnected from its own healing capacity. Mental health disorders are treated with chemicals that numb symptoms rather than address root causes, while the possibility of accessing deeper states of healing through inner work remains sidelined. Institutions invest billions into maintaining the illusion that your mind is broken, and only they can fix it. The entertainment industry plays its part too, constantly bombarding you with distractions, conditioning you to seek pleasure in consumption, and reinforcing a narrative that portrays any exploration outside accepted norms as laughable or dangerous. Movies and shows that touch on expanded consciousness often present it as either mystical nonsense or the domain of unstable individuals, subtly implanting the message that this is not something rational people pursue. And so the suppression continues, more invisible and insidious than ever. But the real genius of the suppression lies in how it makes you police yourself. You hesitate to explore these ideas not because anyone has directly forbidden you, but because of the social conditioning planted over generations. Fear of ridicule, fear of being labeled a conspiracy theorist, fear of stepping outside the boundaries of what's socially acceptable. All of it keeps you locked inside a narrow version of reality. The most effective prison is the one where the prisoner holds the key, but never dares to unlock the door. The forbidden method threatens all of this. It offers you not just an expanded perception of reality, but a liberation from the very structures that keep you docile. And that's why they've worked so hard for so long to keep this knowledge out of your hands. Because once you begin to awaken, once you start peeling back the layers of conditioning, you start to see how fragile their power really is. The entire system depends on your ignorance. Your awakening is their collapse. Long before you could even understand the meaning of control, the system was already shaping your perception. From your very first moments in this world, layers of conditioning were being quietly installed. It started with seemingly harmless rules, phrases, and routines that built the foundation for a life of obedience. You were never taught to explore your own consciousness. You were taught to stay within the lines. Schools taught you how to memorize facts, not how to question the narrative. You were rewarded for following rules and punished for independent thinking. Every bell, every grade, every gold star wasn't just education. It was conditioning. The same system that silenced ancient Hermetic wisdom has found more sophisticated ways to program modern minds. Think back to your earliest years in school. When was critical thinking ever truly encouraged? Real questioning of authority, of accepted history, of reality itself, was never part of the curriculum. Instead, conformity was subtly framed as intelligence. The ones who asked too many questions were often labeled as disruptive, unfocused, or even problematic. And while you were learning to stay in line, society's deeper structures were silently embedding a script into your subconscious. Accept what you're told, trust the authorities, stay within the limits of what is considered normal. This programming didn't stop at the school gates. It continued through every piece of media you consumed. Children's shows, cartoons, and movies presented simple stories of good and evil, heroes and villains. But look closer, and you'll see the same formula repeating over and over again. The hero always fights to protect the established order. The villain is always the one who dares to question or disrupt it. Rebellion is framed as danger. Compliance is framed as virtue. From a young age, you were trained to fear the very idea of questioning the system. You were taught to mock or pity those who step outside its boundaries. And so, even as adults, most people carry that same fear. The deeper questions about existence, consciousness, and true spiritual autonomy remain locked away behind walls of skepticism, ridicule, and social conditioning. Language itself became part of your cage. Phrases like, "Don't talk back," "That's just how it is," or "Be a good boy," were not innocent. They were early scripts designed to associate obedience with safety and rebellion with danger. Over time, these phrases solidify into subconscious rules that guide your behavior without you even realizing it. And when those subconscious rules take root, the system no longer needs to control you directly. You police yourself, stay in line, and even feel a sense of moral superiority for doing so. That's the brilliance of the programming. It creates willing participants in their own suppression. Even your ambitions were programmed. Success was defined for you as climbing the ladder, earning credentials, acquiring status symbols, and playing roles within predefined structures. You weren't taught to pursue inner truth or personal liberation. You were taught to chase validation from external systems that profit from your compliance. And as you strive for that success, you remain too busy, too anxious, and too distracted to ever pause and question why you're chasing it in the first place. The forbidden Hermetic method requires you to dismantle these layers. It demands that you strip away the inherited scripts and reclaim your ability to perceive reality directly. But that process begins with a painful recognition. Most of what you believe about your life was given to you, not chosen by you. You were taught to see spirituality as something external, something mediated by religious figures or institutional authority. You were never encouraged to explore the direct experience of higher consciousness through your own inner faculties. The idea that you could activate something within yourself, something as profound as the pineal gland's true potential, was never part of your education. And that's not an oversight. It's by design. The deeper you look, the more you realize how effective the programming has been. Even now, as you listen to this, you might feel a subtle tension, a hesitation to fully believe, a conditioned skepticism whispering that this sounds too far-fetched. That inner resistance is part of the programming. It was installed to prevent you from ever walking too far down this path. Because if you did, you might stumble upon the one truth that collapses their entire illusion. You were born with everything you need to access higher states of existence. The only thing standing in your way is the system that convinced you otherwise. Even when people catch glimpses of the deeper truth, most never take the next step. They sense that something feels off, that life feels strangely hollow despite all their achievements. But they brush it aside, not because they don't care, but because something inside them resists the idea of confronting what lies beneath. That resistance isn't weakness. It's the result of years of carefully engineered psychological conditioning. You were trained to hesitate, to self-censor, to avoid paths that might lead you outside of what the system has deemed acceptable. And so, even as your intuition nudges you to explore the forbidden knowledge, an inner voice whispers, "Be careful, don't go too far." A fear is the primary currency of control. From childhood, you've been conditioned to associate questioning authority with danger. The punishment for stepping out of line was rarely physical. It was emotional disapproval, shame, isolation. That feeling of being different, of not fitting in, carries a powerful weight. Society has made it so that the cost of exploring deeper levels of consciousness isn't just intellectual risk, it's social exile. And for most, that risk feels too great. Better to stay comfortably numb within the approved reality than to risk the discomfort of isolation. But this fear doesn't come from nowhere. The system has spent generations implanting it, starting with early education, reinforced through media, and solidified through culture. You were praised for following the script, for succeeding within predefined lanes, and punished, directly or indirectly, when you dared to question. The Hermetics called this the first layer of the prison, external authority. But over time, this external authority becomes internalized, transforming into self-doubt. You become your own warden, questioning your sanity for even entertaining certain ideas. Even today, when science edges closer to confirming aspects of ancient knowledge, there remains a cultural hesitancy to fully embrace these findings. Researchers who suggest that consciousness may exist beyond the brain are ridiculed or marginalized. Studies exploring the effects of breathwork, frequency, and neurochemical states remain on the fringes of academic respectability. Why? Because accepting these possibilities would unravel too much at once. It would threaten the credibility of entire industries, pharmaceuticals, mental health, education, and organized religion, all of which rely on maintaining the illusion that your mind can only function within tightly controlled parameters. The most dangerous thing you can do isn't to criticize these institutions directly. It's to awaken to the reality that you don't need them to access your full potential. The forbidden method represents a path to complete autonomy, psychologically, spiritually, and even physically. But full autonomy terrifies those who profit from dependency. A free mind doesn't buy unnecessary products to fill a void. It doesn't require constant entertainment to distract from discomfort. It doesn't seek approval from broken systems. It simply exists in its natural state of expansive awareness, a state that the pineal gland, when activated, allows you to experience directly. Yet this journey is not without real risk, and the Hermetics understood this. That's why the method was never taught casually. Awakening your consciousness exposes you not just to higher truths, but to the illusions you've lived under for your entire life. It strips away comforting lies. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable reality that most of what you thought was your identity is simply a product of conditioning. And for many, that realization is too much. They retreat, falling back into the numbing safety of conformity. That's why so few people ever take the journey seriously. It's not that the method doesn't work. It's that confronting your own internal chains requires more courage than most are willing to summon. The real prison isn't external control, it's the deeply ingrained belief that you're powerless to change. But here's the truth they fought so hard to hide. You were never powerless. The pineal gland remains there, dormant, waiting for your command. The ancient method hasn't disappeared. It's simply been buried beneath layers of fear, distraction, and misinformation. Once you see how deeply the programming runs, you begin to realize how calculated this entire system truly is. Every fear you feel when considering this path was carefully planted. The discomfort you feel as you listen now is not a warning from within. It's the residue of their design. They engineered your hesitation. They built your doubt. And if you can recognize that, even for a moment, then you're already beginning to loosen the chains they so carefully forged around your mind. The forbidden method isn't some mystical fairy tale or vague promise of enlightenment whispered by gurus seeking your attention. It's a disciplined, structured system rooted in principles that have been refined and guarded for centuries. The Hermetic initiates who practiced it weren't chasing illusions. They were pursuing mastery of the mind, body connection that unlocks the latent capacities of the pineal gland. While modern science is just beginning to scratch the surface, these ancient practitioners mapped the path with incredible precision. And while it's been obscured by time, censorship, and mockery, the method itself remains as effective as it was when it was first passed from teacher to student. At its core, the Hermetic activation method revolves around three essential pillars: breathwork, frequency alignment, and focused intention. Each one plays a critical role in creating the precise internal conditions necessary to awaken the pineal gland. Breathwork is far more than a relaxation technique. It is a precise manipulation of your nervous system, blood chemistry, and energetic balance. Through controlled breathing sequences, sometimes rapid, sometimes slow, sometimes held, practitioners are able to alter the carbon dioxide levels in the blood, modulate the pH, and influence the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. This shifts the brain's operating state and prepares it for higher-level activation. But breathwork alone is not enough. Frequency alignment is the second crucial pillar. The Hermetics understood that everything in existence vibrates and that certain frequencies resonate with specific aspects of the body and mind. Chanting, humming tuning forks, and specific auditory frequencies were used to create resonant vibrations that directly stimulated the crystalline structures within the pineal gland. These vibrations, when combined with breathwork, create a state of resonance inside the brain, amplifying electromagnetic activity and stimulating the gland's piezoelectric properties. This isn't mythology, it's grounded in measurable physics. And then comes focused intention, perhaps the most overlooked yet vital element. The mind's capacity to concentrate, to visualize with absolute clarity, plays a decisive role in shaping internal neurochemical cascades. The Hermetic practitioner is trained to hold specific visualizations, geometric shapes, sacred symbols, or imagined energy flows while engaging breathwork and sound. This triad of breath, frequency, and focus creates a powerful feedback loop where neurochemical, electromagnetic, and energetic systems converge. The result is a state where the pineal gland begins to behave not as a passive organ, but as an active interface between the physical body and higher planes of consciousness. When executed with precision, practitioners report extraordinary experiences that defy conventional understanding. Time distorts or dissolves entirely. Boundaries between self and universe fade. Some describe encounters with higher intelligences, vast fields of universal wisdom, or sensations of overwhelming love and unity. These experiences aren't hallucinations or fantasies. They are the byproduct of stepping beyond the narrow frequency band that everyday waking consciousness occupies. The Hermetics called it tuning into higher realities, a state where the soul directly interacts with universal truth, unfiltered by the limitations of the senses. Yet despite how incredible this sounds, the Hermetic method was never marketed as an easy or casual practice. This was not some 5-minute daily routine for instant enlightenment. It was a path that demanded preparation, discipline, and deep self-awareness before one could fully activate the pineal gland. Much of the preliminary work involved purifying the mind from toxic thought patterns, breaking free from external programming, and mastering emotional balance. The mind had to be strong enough to handle what it would experience once the veil was lifted. An undisciplined mind thrown into these states risked being overwhelmed or destabilized. This is why the method was reserved for initiates deemed ready to carry the responsibility that comes with expanded perception. In our modern world of instant gratification, this level of commitment seems foreign. We've been trained to believe that knowledge can be bought, that truth can be downloaded, that enlightenment is just another product. But true awakening cannot be consumed. It must be earned. The forbidden Hermetic method stands as a direct challenge to the culture of shortcuts. It requires you to confront yourself, to peel away the comfortable layers of identity and programming you've spent a lifetime building. And only then, when you stand fully present in that uncomfortable rawness, does the gateway begin to open. The power to activate the pineal gland has never disappeared. It has only been buried beneath layers of distraction, ridicule, and fear. The ancient Hermetics left a map, but the choice to walk the path is yours alone. Few will ever attempt it. Even fewer will persist. But for those who do, the reward is nothing less than a direct encounter with the true nature of reality. An experience that permanently shifts everything you once believed about yourself, this world, and the hidden forces that shape it. What happens when the pineal gland is fully activated is something that words often fail to capture. Language, limited as it is, struggles to describe states of being that exist outside the ordinary dimensions we live in. But those who have walked the path, those who have endured the disciplined activation of this dormant gateway, speak of experiences that fundamentally rewrite their understanding of existence. They describe reality not as something fixed, but as layers of perception, each more profound and expansive than the one before it. Time dissolves. Space becomes fluid, and what was once experienced as separation between self and universe vanishes entirely. These are not hallucinations conjured by fantasy or delusion. They are profound shifts in consciousness that allow the practitioner to perceive levels of reality that are always present, but typically inaccessible to the average mind locked inside linear thinking. When the pineal gland becomes active, consciousness can transcend the narrow frequency band of ordinary perception and interface directly with the field that underlies all of existence. Some Hermetic practitioners describe this as piercing the veil, stepping beyond the illusion of the material world and into what they called the Great Mind, a state where all information, all wisdom, and all creation exists simultaneously. In these expanded states, practitioners often report encounters with higher intelligences, not necessarily beings in the physical sense, but aspects of consciousness far beyond the ego-driven human mind. They experience overwhelming waves of unconditional love, wisdom, and unity. Some describe being able to observe their own lives, even entire timelines, as if from a vantage point outside of time itself. This expanded perception doesn't erase individuality, but dissolves the illusion that we are separate from everything else. The Hermetics understood this intimately. To them, individuality was like a wave rising from the ocean. It appears distinct for a moment, but never truly separate from the sea it came from. But these experiences are not merely spiritual or philosophical. They have profound psychological consequences that ripple into everyday life. Practitioners often report permanent changes in how they view suffering, fear, and death itself. The anxieties that once ruled them begin to lose their grip, replaced by a deep inner peace that comes from knowing their existence extends far beyond this temporary physical vessel. The distractions of modern life, materialism, competition, and artificial status, begin to lose their seductive power. What once seemed so important becomes trivial in the face of such overwhelming clarity. And yet, this is precisely why the activation of the pineal gland poses such a threat to those who thrive on control. An individual who has experienced direct connection with higher consciousness becomes impossible to manipulate. Fear no longer works on them. Consumer culture loses its hold. Political and religious institutions become irrelevant. The need for external validation dissolves. They become sovereign, not in theory, but in lived experience. And a society made up of such individuals would be ungovernable by the structures that currently dominate the world. The Hermetic masters understood that true freedom is not given, it is discovered. It exists within you, waiting for you to strip away the illusions that obscure it. The forbidden method is not about escaping reality, but about seeing reality for what it truly is, a fluid, interconnected field of infinite potential. And once you've seen it, once you've experienced the vastness of existence firsthand, the artificial limits imposed by society can no longer hold you. But with this expanded awareness also comes responsibility. Awakening is not a license to detach from the world, but a call to engage with it from a place of wisdom and compassion. The Hermetic path teaches that the awakened individual becomes a beacon for others, a stabilizing force in a world trapped in illusion. And this, more than anything, is what the system fears most. Because when enough individuals awaken to this reality, the collective illusion begins to crumble. The structures that rely on your ignorance can no longer sustain themselves when faced with a growing wave of sovereign minds who see beyond the veil. The greatest threat to any system built on control is not rebellion, not revolution in the streets, but the quiet, unshakable certainty of an awakened mind. Because once you see through the illusion, once you recognize how deeply you've been conditioned, you become untouchable in ways that terrify those who profit from your compliance. They don't fear physical resistance nearly as much as they fear mass awakening. A system can crush uprisings with force, but it cannot control millions of people who no longer believe in its legitimacy. For centuries, every major institution that governs human behavior, religious, political, economic, has functioned by keeping humanity operating within a narrow band of consciousness. People who believe their existence is limited to the physical body, that their value is defined by external status, that fulfillment comes from material accumulation. These are people who can be controlled. Fear keeps them obedient. Desire keeps them consuming. Division keeps them isolated. This trifecta forms the unbreakable chain that binds the masses generation after generation. But all of it collapses the moment a person experiences the vastness of their true nature. Once you know you are not your status, your job title, your possessions, or even your physical body, none of their manipulations work anymore. This is exactly why the Hermetic knowledge was so dangerous to power structures throughout history. It offered direct access to universal wisdom without the need for priests, kings, or governments. The Hermetics didn't preach blind faith. They provided tools for direct experience. The pineal gland wasn't some poetic symbol. It was the literal gateway to these higher states. With each activation, individuals became increasingly immune to fear-based control. And as more initiates awakened, the threat to institutional authority grew. What would happen if entire populations stopped believing in the narratives that kept them enslaved? if people refuse to play their roles in the manufactured hierarchy. That fear has haunted rulers for centuries. Throughout history, those who pursued forbidden knowledge have been persecuted. Gnostics, early mystics, Hermetics, and countless others were hunted, silenced, or erased from historical records. Their teachings were demonized, their texts destroyed, or hidden away in secret archives controlled by the very institutions that condemned them. This wasn't because the knowledge was dangerous in the way they claimed. It was dangerous to their monopoly on power. Control requires uniformity, awakening breeds unpredictability. An individual who trusts their own direct experience of reality is far more difficult to manipulate than one who relies on external authorities to define truth. In today's world, the suppression continues, but it's far more subtle. It doesn't require burning books or public executions. Instead, they drown forbidden knowledge under waves of noise, ridicule, and manufactured skepticism. The very idea of exploring higher consciousness is framed as naive, foolish, or even insane. Mainstream media floods you with distractions designed to keep you busy, anxious, and dependent. The educational system continues to reward obedience and rote memorization, not inquiry or spiritual exploration. Social media platforms algorithmically promote shallow content, ensuring that anything which challenges the dominant narrative remains buried. But here's the uncomfortable truth they desperately hope you never realize. The only reason these mechanisms exist at all is because the threat is real. If this knowledge had no power, they wouldn't bother suppressing it. The existence of such elaborate control structures is evidence of just how dangerous an awakened population would be to their grip on humanity. The forbidden method threatens to dismantle the very foundation of modern power structures. Not through violence, not through rebellion, but through mass internal liberation. A society of individuals who are no longer controlled by fear or desire is a society that no longer needs external rulers. Governments would lose their leverage. Corporations would lose their customer base built on manufactured dissatisfaction. Organized religions would lose their congregations. And the very economic models that thrive on perpetual scarcity and competition would collapse. This is why the suppression is so relentless. Because if even a fraction of the population began to activate their true potential, the ripple effects would be unstoppable. One awakened mind inspires another. Conversations shift, values change, the old narratives crumble, and eventually, the system itself collapses under the weight of its own irrelevance. That is the ultimate threat they face, not resistance but obsolescence. Now, you stand at the edge of a decision most will never even recognize. The choice is simple but not easy. You can continue along the path laid out for you, safe, predictable, and controlled. Or you can take the first steps toward reclaiming the power that has always been yours. The Hermetic path was never intended for the masses, because few have the courage to walk it. But if you've made it this far, if you've allowed these truths to settle uncomfortably in your mind, then you've already begun to loosen the grip of the system that has held you captive. Awakening is not a sudden moment of revelation. It's a process. It begins by questioning everything you've been taught to accept without challenge. Every belief about success, happiness, authority, and even your own identity must be examined. Where did these beliefs originate? Who benefits from you holding on to them? The deeper you look, the more you'll realize that much of what you considered truth was nothing more than inherited programming, designed to serve interests that do not have your well-being in mind. The Hermetic method calls for discipline, but it does not demand perfection. Start small. Begin by becoming conscious of your own patterns. Pay attention to the automatic responses that arise in your mind, the defensiveness you feel when confronted with new ideas, the fear of standing out, the craving for external validation. These are all remnants of your conditioning. Notice them, question them, and gradually begin to release them. Awareness is the first key that unlocks the deeper doors. In your daily life, introduce intentional practices that align with the principles the Hermetics taught: breathwork to regulate your internal state, visualization to focus your intent, exposure to frequencies and vibrations that elevate rather than numb your consciousness. These are not esoteric fantasies. They are tools grounded in the intricate connection between your mind, body, and the energetic field that surrounds you. As you engage with these practices, you'll begin to feel subtle shifts, moments of clarity where the noise fades and an underlying sense of peace begins to emerge. But do not expect immediate fireworks or mystical visions. The Hermetic path rewards consistency and humility. Each step forward reveals new layers of illusion to peel away. The goal is not to escape this world, but to engage with it from a position of clarity, sovereignty, and purpose. True awakening transforms how you interact with reality itself. It allows you to see the manipulations without being ensnared by them. It empowers you to choose your own path, one that aligns with your deepest values rather than the hollow promises offered by a system designed to keep you chasing endlessly. And as more individuals walk this path, the collective begins to shift. The system built on mass compliance weakens when faced with a growing number of individuals who no longer respond to its levers. Every awakened mind becomes a beacon, quietly inspiring others to question, to seek, to remember what they once instinctively knew as children, but were taught to forget. This is how real change happens, not through violent revolution, but through quiet, widespread awakening. The world does not need more followers. It needs more sovereign individuals who have reclaimed the keys to their own consciousness. The pineal gland remains there within you, not as a relic of forgotten biology, but as a living portal waiting to be activated by those ready to see beyond the veil. You've been conditioned to believe this path is impossible or even dangerous, but the real danger lies in remaining asleep, endlessly chasing empty promises while your true potential lies dormant. If you're ready to go deeper, we share uncensored insights inside the free Insights Academy newsletter. Don't wait for permission to reclaim what was always yours. Sign up through the link below and receive your free copy of the Kybalion to begin your journey. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."